morning, everyone. The feed will be going live on YouTube and the portal. Good morning, Mary. Would you like to check your microphone, please?
Okay, there we go. Can you hear me?
Sounds great. Thank you.
Okay.
Good morning, Lori. Would you like to do a microphone check for me? I see that you've unmuted, but I cannot hear you.
Okay, how about now?
That's great. Thank you.
Okay.
Hey, good morning. This is Sherry Terrell.
Thank you, Sherry. And I sincerely apologize. Will the representative for seat 20A please do a mic check? I'm not sure how to say your name. Member Trinidad?
Hello, this is Guasiwa Trinidad, alternate for Rose Amador.
Thank you so much. Good morning, Juliana. Would you like to do a mic check?
Good morning, everybody. Sitting in for Kishan Bujani of the South Bay Consortium of Adult Ed.
I'm sorry, Juliana, can you repeat that? Are you representing a seat today?
Kishan Bujani, I don't know the seat for the education part of the South Bay Consortium of Adult Education Reentry Program. Kishan Bujani.
Got it. Looks like you're here for seat 27, but as a non-voting representative.
That is correct. Thank you.
Thank you.
Deputy Chief Tyndall, would you like to do a mic check?
Sounds good over here.
Thank you.
Good morning, Melanie. Would you like to do a microphone check? Looks like you're still muted. It looks like you, there we
Good
go.
morning, Jill.
There we go. And are you
Thank
here
you.
representing a seat?
No,
Great.
panelist.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And good morning, Damon. Would you like to do a mic check?
Good morning. Sorry, it took me a minute.
No worries. Sounds great. Thank you. Good morning, Matthew. Would you like to check your microphone?
Good morning.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Molly. Would you like to check your mic for me, please?
Good morning.
Sounds good. Thank you. And good morning, Maya. Would you like to check your microphone?
Good morning.
Sounds good. Thank you. And Rick, would you like to check your microphone? Rick Sung, if you'd like to check your microphone, you may. And good morning, Rhonda, if you'd like to do a microphone check.
Hi.
Can you give me one more test?
I have a lot of background noise. Let me fix that.
Okay, I can hear you though. Thank you. And good morning, Amanda. Would you like to check your microphone?
Okay, this is Rhonda. Can you hear me?
Yes, Rhonda, sounds good.
Thank you.
And hi, this is Amanda. Good morning.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Judge Ryan checking in.
Thank you. We can hear you. And Casey, would you like to check your microphone?
Yes, good morning, everybody.
Good morning. Thank you. And Robert, would you like to check your microphone?
Good morning.
Sounds good. Thank you. And good morning, Erin. Would you like to check your microphone?
Good morning.
Thank you very much. And good morning, Miguel. Would you like to check your microphone?
Sure. Good morning. Can you hear me?
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you.
And good morning, Anu. Would you like to check your microphone?
Hello, good morning.
There we
everyone.
go. Sounds good, thank you.
Can anyone hear me? This is Rick.
Yes, now we can hear you, thank you.
Thank you very much.
And good morning, David. Would you like to check your microphone?
Sorry. Hi, how are you?
Sounds good, thank you very much. I'm
Thank
well.
you.
Chief Garnett, would you like to check your microphone? Oh, I see you.
Yes, can you hear me?
Unmuted. Sounds great, thank you.
Slides because they updated them this morning, so they don't confuse.
And Pablo, would you like to check your microphone?
Microphone check.
Sounds great, thank you.
Yeah.
Good morning, everyone. Did you all do roll call already? No? All right. Could I ask the clerk to take the roll?
Good morning. Chairperson Chavez.
Here.
Thank you. Member Lori Smith.
Here.
Member Cora Tomalinas. Member Cora Tomalinas absent. Member Judge Deborah Ryan.
Present.
Thank you. Member Martha Wapensky.
Here.
Member Laura Garnett.
Here.
Member Dr. Sarah Cody is present, but is Member Rhonda McClinton Brown here?
Yes, present.
Thank you. Member Maya Esparza.
Here.
Thank you. Member Molly O'Neill.
I'm virtually present.
Thank you. Member Jeffrey Rosen. Absent. Member David Angel.
I'm here. Good morning.
Member Dan Winter. Member Robert Menicaci.
Here.
Member Sherry Terrell.
Here.
Thank you. Member John Mills. Member John Mills. Member Mary Ann Dewan. Member Steve Olmos. Member Pablo Gaxiola.
Present.
Thank you. Member Matthew Fisk.
Present.
Member Miguel Marquez.
Here.
Thank you. Member Aaron O'Brien.
Here.
Member Waxiwat Trinidad. Member Trinidad.
Sorry, I was trying to unmute. I'm here.
Thank you. Member Anthony Williams. Member David Robinson. Member Christine Clifford. Member Judge Stephen Manley. Member Keeley.
Sounds like he is absent. Member Anu Perumatam,
Yes, present.
present. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we should have checked. Member Andrew James is not present today.
Not present today.
Thank you very much. Member Mary Crocker Cook,
Present.
present. Thank you. Today for seat 27, Juliana Brahim is here as a non-voting representative.
Good morning.
Good morning. Seat 28, Dave Tyndall is here also as a non-voting representative.
Good morning.
Seat number 9, Casey Halcon.
Present.
Present, thank you. Seat number 30, Amanda Clifford.
Present.
Present, thank you. And seat 31, Todd Kendrick.
Dennis Emmett is here to represent for Todd Kendrick.
Thank you, as a non-voting representative. Thank you, Dennis. That concludes the roll, and you do have a quorum.
Great. Well, thank you everybody for being here today. This is a one kind of a focused meeting, and so what I'd like to do is we have one item on our consent calendar, which is the minutes. And if I could get a motion for approval, and then we're going to do unanimous consent on the minutes, if that's all right. May I get a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Moved from Miguel and seconded by Chief Garnett. And we're going to do unanimous consent because I'll age when we do all this.
I apologize. I believe County Council could correct me, but I believe that the ordinance requires a roll call vote. Maybe Council can confirm. I do apologize. My understanding is that the ordinance requires a roll call vote, but we'll go quickly.
I don't believe you, but okay.
No?
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Dave can correct me.
That's right. Just go ahead if you want to.
Okay. Chairperson Chavez?
Yes.
Member Smith?
Sorry, yes.
Thank you. Member Ryan?
Abstain, I wasn't there.
Thank you. Member Wapensky?
Yes.
Member Garnett?
Yes.
Member McClinton Brown, excuse me.
Yes.
Member Esparza?
Yes.
Member O'Neill?
Yes.
Member Angel?
Yes.
Member Menicaci?
Yes.
Member Terrell?
Yes.
Member Gaxiola?
Yes.
Member Fisk?
Yes.
Member Marquez? Miguel Marquez?
Yes.
Thank you. Member O'Brien?
Yes.
Member Trinidad?
Yes.
Member Perumatam?
Yes.
Member Crocker Cook?
Yes.
Member Halcon?
Yes.
Member Clifford?
Yes.
That concludes the roll call vote. Thank you very much, Madam President, Chairperson.
Great. Thank you very much. So let me just say, I requested this meeting at our last meeting so that we could bring back best thinking and data on pretrial and public safety outcomes and the lessons we've learned from the shelter-in-place order and the emergency bail order that went into effect that had zero bail. I also asked for a report back on criteria and parameters that would be used for pretrial releases, as well as information relative to what is needed to ensure the success of our pretrial clients. So I'm going to ask, the staff's going to do Sheriff Smith, followed by Matt, and then followed by Miguel. And then what I'm just going to ask is that then we're going to open it up for discussion from the group. And I know, and I'm hoping we have a fulsome discussion. I'm not sure I got the, once we're done, what I'm curious about from all of your perspective is both how we're doing and what we need to be doing next. And you all play a role in this. So I'm very interested in making sure that we have a discussion. So Sheriff, you're going to get us started?
I think Supervisor, I'm going to kick it off and then I'll pass the baton over. So great. So good morning, everyone. It's in this new normal. It's so great to see everyone's face, even though we're in 2 dimensions, not 3. It is still nice to see you all as we sort of adapt to most of the time being by ourselves. But let me just start by thanking Melanie Jimenez Perez for putting together this information, including what you'll see in the attached supplemental report, which was distributed this morning. So our apologies for the late distribution, but it's been updated to include results from a survey of pretrial clients. And I think that survey information is going to be very helpful to us. But let me also start by noting that today is actually 4 months since the county's public health officer issued the initial shelter in order place. If you recall, that was issued on March 16th, and today, of course, is July 16th. So 4 months in, and our response as a county has continued to evolve and has adapted to maintain the safety net for the vulnerable populations who are facing, frankly, greater hardships than others during this pandemic. Our focus has been on ensuring the health and safety of the community in compliance with both state and county guidelines. And I wish I could include in that federal guidelines, but I think we all sort of know that we're not getting a lot of guidance from the federal administration. Since the group met last in June, the Superior Court has extended the $0 bail schedule until September 1st. Also, let me note that back on June 23rd, when the Board of Supervisors met, they approved a referral to engage the community and to develop recommendations relating to policing, use of force, and emergency response. So I point out these developments to set context for today's conversations. We are no question at a crossroads, and we have an opportunity to reimagine our criminal justice system through a racial and social justice equity lens. That said, one of the challenges is we are in the midst of a global pandemic and in the midst of significant budget reductions, largely due to the pandemic, but to other factors as well. So as we get started, let's take a moment to acknowledge how quickly we have adapted, and let's remain committed to partnering in new ways under a drastically different landscape that came sort of all of a sudden on us. That said, is this slide number 2? This presentation builds on the June Reentry Network presentation while focusing on pretrial and public safety outcomes. Toward the end of the presentation, we will focus on a framework for looking at operational changes that have been made during the COVID-19 pandemic. Yep.
I'm so sorry, this is Cindy. I forgot to ask for public comment.
Oh.
And so we have one person, and I'm gonna just, and I'm sorry to do this, I should have caught it sooner. Clerk, if you could let Scott speak, and he'll have 2 minutes, and I apologize, Scott, for missing you, and then we'll go back to your presentation. I'm very sorry. I will finish this copy. Go ahead.
Our next speaker is Scott Largent. I'm unmuting you. Please accept the unmute. You will have 2 minutes to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking.
Okay, good morning, everyone. You could only imagine the temper tantrum Scotty was having. The fact of getting public comment kind of ran over right there. I do appreciate you figuring it out and coming back to me on this. I'm concerned that the public is being left out on a lot of stuff these days. So this was kind of like I'm just used to it. Everything gets chopped down. It's 3 minutes, 2 minutes, 1 minute. The reason I'm talking today to the group here It would be nice if you guys could get together before people enter the criminal justice system. If this was all there as a safety blanket prior, we're going to get there one of these days, but I don't think it's anytime soon. I was getting coffee this morning in the psych ward downtown San Jose, our new psych ward that we put together down here. These people need water, okay? So it's a basic thing, water. The city of San Jose shut every water fountain off. So the people down here are thirsty, and it's a basic thing. Now I'm talking to a lot of people in power right here. Okay, we got the DA, we got the sheriff. Why don't you guys go buy some goddamn water and start helping these people down here? I'm handing out water. I'm homeless. I'm trying to keep these people hydrated right now. And when the paramedics show up and the fire department show up and the entire cavalry because somebody is dehydrated because you shut the water off, you know, that's like sticking a dog in a backyard, not leaving the bowl of water, not leaving the food. And the dog belongs in the house. The dog deserves to sleep in the bed. You guys are just shoving them all out into the elements right now. I know it's like the Titanic. These are the third-class passengers right now. Give them some water. Give them some food. Give them some bathrooms. This is a humanitarian crisis. Wake up.
And again, I apologize for that. Miguel?
Thank you. Yeah, toward the end of the presentation today, we will, towards the end of the presentation, actually, there'll be a focus on a framework for looking at operational changes that have been made during the COVID-19 pandemic and to respond to the shelter-in-place order and the emergency bail orders. Myself and members of the county's Public Safety and Justice Partnership will be available to answer questions at the end of the presentation. So now I'd like to pass the baton on to Sheriff Lori Smith, who will present slides 3 through 6 regarding the jail population and releases. Sheriff?
Thank you. First of all, the first slide really talks about our population reduction, and I'll talk about the numbers in the next slide. But our goal is to limit the intake into housing areas of new inmates and to reduce the population. It's obvious why we want to reduce new people coming into the facilities. And the reason that we want to reduce the population is because we have isolation units. We have more flexibility to social distance and to dedicate entire units to our 14-day isolation for new people coming in. So our goal is to do both of those things, but our primary priority is to make sure that we maintain public safety first. Our population is, and if I can have the next slide, please. Our population is down today by 37%. Our population today is 2,065, and that is a decrease from the date on March 9th of 3,294. It is a decrease of over 1,200 inmates in jail. You know, it's kind of a misnomer that we've reduced it by 1,000, because what that doesn't really take into account is all of the bookings that we continue to have and all the intake that we continue to have. So since March, we have actually released over 9,000 inmates, because that accounts for in and out. Oh, sorry, the next slide, please. So if you look at all of the types of releases since March, and you add up that column under releases, it's more than 9,000 that we've released in 4 months. We also reviewed for that 9,000 number, we reviewed rearrests, and in 4 months, 13% have been rearrested. If you drill down more into the numbers, like the first one where it talks about the 156, that number has an 18% rearrest, and sometimes multiple arrests, but an 18% rearrest for that group of people. And, that's really a high rearrest rate when you're only talking about a 4-month period of time. So the next slide shows the type of releases. And I think when you look at pretrial and supervised OR, about the 5th bar down, that number of 1397 represents 15% of all the releases are pretrial supervised OR. The sheriff's office has, obviously working with the court, we have the ability to do cite and release, and the cite and release is the 19% releases are cited by our agency. Zero bail releases account for 10% of the total releases. And so it's kind of a confusing chart, but I think that it really speaks to how people are releasing, but keeping in mind that we have over 9,000 people who are released in that 4-month period. And that's all I have. Madam Chair, thank you.
Thanks, Sheriff.
Good morning, Matthew Fisk. Thank you everybody for your time. Pretrial services, as compared to our partner agencies, has a relatively simple and focused role. Our mission is to inform judicial decision-making, provide as much information to the court and our partners as possible for effective decisions, and to ensure that the clients released under our supervision appear in court at all of their court appearances free of new offenses, so that they're following the court orders, staying away from alleged victims, and not committing new crimes. That's what we focus on, those 2 items. Ideally, our focus is safety and accessibility. We want to afford this opportunity for everybody, and that would qualify based on their background and the situation and the environment they would be released into. Of course, we want it to be fair, and it needs to be effective. So we do focus on evidence-based practices. Our assessments are based on local and evidence-supported data that goes back historically. Next slide, please. When we do the initial assessment at the jail, normally everything's kind of in thirds right now. There used to be about 3,000 releases per month, say physical releases from the jail. Now there's about 2,000. We used to do about 1,500 screenings per month. Now we're doing 1,000 to 1,200 or so. When we screen individuals, not all the individuals that come to the jail qualify for screening. There's criteria that has to be met in order for us to be able to screen them. But when we do so, we go through these steps, which I won't read. But I would like to point out one important step that's in the middle, and that's the interviewing of defendants, the face-to-face interviewing. We're not doing the full interviews right now. Some interviews we're not doing. We are getting the history of the client. 8 or 9 out of 10 clients have been to the jail before. We have previous information about them. We do get contact information and contact alleged victims and other references. We do a risk assessment. We have quite a bit of information about the people, but as far as the actual interview, in order to honor the social distancing, which means avoiding the face-to-face contact when it's unnecessary, and avoiding having the sheriff's officers moving people around, and really to expedite the release process, we're not doing full interviews right now. However, we would like to take steps to resume that step. All the other steps we are doing in an effort to expedite safe releases. Once we've done our report, we obviously submit it to the judge with a recommendation, and the judges have been wonderful partners in working just about around the clock and getting decisions back to us. When there's doubt, they write us, so we will consult with police officers and get the information that's needed to make an informed decision. Next slide, please. Prior to COVID, pre-COVID, our main 3 performance measures were safety, compliance, and court appearance. Safety is measured by the number of people, or the percentage of cases where Upon case closure, people had committed new offenses, and those new offenses were confirmed. There was a conviction, some sort of confirmation that was relevant to the conditions of release. The second measure, compliance, and that would be regardless of the charge. It could be stealing an apple or it could be something much more serious, but any new offense that pertained to the conditions of release, if they violated that, then they would count into that small percentage, 5%. So normally 95% of people come to court offense-free upon case closure. Compliance, same thing. That has more to do with court orders like staying away from victims and things like that. And then the third measure, court appearance, this counts all the individuals who have attended every single court hearing. So if a person had 10 court hearings scheduled and they missed one, they would count into that 1/3 that lately have not been attending court pre-COVID. So 2 out of 3 people were attending all of their court appearances. And that's one area where we would like to improve. Now, mid-COVID, next slide, please. We're not able to measure as we were before because courts not being held for many of the cases. So we're not closing many of the cases. Cases are typically scheduled out 120 days when it's feasible. Obviously, in custody cases are held almost on a daily basis. But most of the cases are not being closed. Therefore, we cannot measure as we did before upon case closure. We are measuring the number of clients that are rearrested. Now, the measure that we have might be a little bit different than that of the Sheriff's Department. We're measuring everybody either cited or rearrested. And this is on items that have to do with their conditions of release. So it's about the same. We did have a higher number in May, but it's roughly 5%. But I just want to make it clear that this measure of rearrest, being cited or rearrested subsequent to release, is different than the normal performance measure. I'd also like to note that as I said, everything's in thirds. So the jail's population has decreased by 1/3. That third does not give credit to the Sheriff's Department for all of the processing that they're doing day and night to expedite these releases, safe releases. To keep the population at just over 2,000 when it was around 3,200 is quite a job around the clock. The jail's population has gone down by about 1/3, the daily population. In the same time frame, the pretrial population has gone up by 1/3. But if you go back a year, the pretrial population has gone up by 100%. It's doubled. On pretrial supervision, last time this year, we had around 1,300, 1,400 clients. Now we have 2,700 or 2,800 clients. So it's doubled over the course of a year. My main concern right now lies among a relatively small group of individuals that are rearrested over and over again. And when I first looked at this, I was very concerned for obvious reasons. That's the purpose of this meeting. And then I started to look at Santa Clara County historically, and I realized that actually, next slide, please. Actually, it's consistent with what's been happening. At a future meeting, I'd like to show what those rates look like, but overall, it's around 8%. About 8% of people last year this time, and 8% of individuals released for all release types this time are either cited or arrested again within 30 days. And then it increases each month. So the sheriff shared a slide that was more longitudinal over a longer period of time. That said, Santa Clara County has a challenge with clients who return back to our custody. They return back to jail over and over again. This is something that we are striving to improve. So, but I will say that the rates have not increased significantly over the past, even having far less people in custody. So far, so good. However, we do need to focus on a small group of individuals who continue to be rearrested. They may be zero bailed out right now, and they always have been. We were tasked with asking our clients. So this only went out to supervised clients, not OR'd clients, not zero bailed clients, but the clients that we supervise. And of the 2,700 or so clients we had about a week ago, we were able to send out through Alert SCC text messages. So about 300 of our clients, unfortunately, don't have cell phones, and they're likely to be more needy than a lot of the people who do, and were able to respond. Of the 2,400 clients that we reached out to, 545 responded within a week. And I think this morning we had about 565. So that survey ran last week. And what we did, without calling it the ASAM dimensions, which is a treatment tool used to support people in a holistic way in the various aspects of their life, we sent out some more user-friendly questions in priority order. We asked them about housing, food, medical, mental, alcohol, and drug health. We asked them about transportation, employment, overall financial stability, and anything else. And so I was pleased to receive quite a few responses. If we can go to the next slide. And I was not surprised that over half of the people indicated that they had an urgent need in all 9 of the 9 categories. You can see there's a dip when it comes to mental health and alcohol and drug help. And that's not a surprise, as a lot of people are working through ambivalence, recognizing that they actually have a problem in that area, and they may be a little more hesitant to answer that they need help in that area in a survey from the pretrial services department. But overall, the 545 clients that had access to a phone responded that they have significant, actually urgent needs on a scale of 1 to 10, quite a few 10s in all 9 of the 9 areas. We can go to the next slide, please. And the question was, could we go back 1 slide? I'm sorry, just in case. The question we asked in plain English was, how much do you need the following kinds of help on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the highest? Okay, if we could go to the next slide, please. And then the follow-up question was, have you tried to get such help? And if so, how successful was it? Unfortunately, only 8% of the respondents indicated that they did try to get help and were in fact successful. As expected, a lot of people attempted. Actually, a lot of people, the slide really speaks for itself. I think if we go to the next slide, it'll be more informative. We realized we have some low-hanging fruit. Over half of the people said they didn't need help at all. 20% of the clients responded. Only 8% again were successful. But the low-hanging fruit lies within the clients that expressed needs in 2 parts. The first part was, I didn't try or I didn't know how. The second part was, I tried, but I wasn't successful, and my situation remains the same. So we obviously have opportunities to inform our clients of the resources that are available. One of the things that I realized in going through this process, we've been in such a hurry trying to keep up with the growing client load, and not something that we've done on our own. We've only been able to do it with the Sheriff's Department, the DA, the PD, and all of our partners. We really, really need to work a lot more with the Office of Reentry Services and Behavioral Health. A snapshot of 2 weeks ago indicated that only 15% of our clients were actually connected with the Reentry Service Center. So that's an area where pretrial services absolutely needs to make a focused attempt to connect our clients to services that they need. Now, normally, some might say that's not really the mission of pretrial services. We're trying to get people to court as promptly as possible and through the system, and not trying to engage them in a lot of obligations that might resemble a sentence, a post-sentence conviction. However, with court delays, which are inevitable, the court's been wonderful, these clients need additional services because it's going to be quite some time before we can all catch up with the adjudication of these cases. And so the role of pretrial services is changing, in that we need to engage more than ever with behavioral health partners and the Office of Reentry Services, Office of Supportive Housing, Social Services, and many others. Okay, if we could move on to the next slide. I'd like to leave room for everybody else. So I've coined these phrases. They may not be the best or the most technically accurate, but anchoring, platforming, and bridging. Honestly, 9 out of 10 people in custody, whether it's jail or prison, get released. They don't necessarily, they will stabilize in jail. However, helping people to overcome what 80% of our clients suffer from, which is mental illness and or substance dependence, takes, it's a matter of living life outside of custody, learning to be self-reliant rather than relying on a system for all of the needs. And that is best done with best practices out of jail. So anchoring, everybody needs home and food, a daily meal. Of our 2,700 clients, over 200 are currently transient or unhoused. Some of them have ankle bracelets on. And about a third of them indicated they have urgent housing needs. Platforming, personal health. There's a sincere fear among people out in this environment for their health. They fear getting tested for COVID because what would that mean? And of course, they assuage that through denial. So they don't necessarily get the treatment they need for mental health. And they may try to cope by using substances. A good 80% of our clients are in that situation. They really need assistance. And then bridging. So once they've been anchored and kind of have a platform, some help to stabilize, they need to bridge to something better. We all need to improve our life and have hope for something better. A job is okay and it'll stabilize, but really people need a career. It's not enough to work a couple of fast food or labor jobs and try to make ends meet, especially here. That's no secret to anybody. So transportation and employment go hand in hand. If you have a car, it helps to get a job. It takes a job to get a car. One of the things that we see is with our relatively small female population, especially mothers, having a car makes all the difference. So that's something we're going to work on. Again, it's not something that pretrial has typically been focused on, but we are going to be reaching out and looking for any resources that there might be for these clients. Okay, I think we can move to the last slide. I'd just like to point out the obvious, and that is that it's difficult enough. People's lives were spiraling out of control before they came into custody. They didn't have things the way they wanted them to be, and they were in a bad spot. In many cases, they were able to stabilize because of the services of jail, custody health. In some senses, and thank goodness that we have that. Actually, Minneapolis contacted me. They were wondering what services, pretrial services, is receiving. And I haven't spoken to them yet. It's been a game of phone tag. But I will indicate that we've received a lot of support from law enforcement, from our Department of Correction, from the District Attorney's Office and the Public Defender, ADO, IDO, and nothing but offers for support. There's no way to do this on our own, and we're not. But probably if you were to ask, what does pretrial services need? I could point to San Francisco and say, well, they're staffed 4 times what we're staffed. Alameda County now 3 times, and San Mateo County double. That's not realistic. It's not realistic to just throw additional positions at a situation that will probably look a lot different in 2 years from now. But by leveraging the existing resources that we have that I've mentioned, I'm confident that we can be successful. So I am very, very interested in having really collaborative planning on what a safe and healthy release looks like, and doing it in a very holistic manner, really tracking a group of individuals that are of the greatest need and following them. I think that's the way we can find out how we can continue to do this. So far, we haven't recognized a great increase in threats to public safety. It's been relatively the same. However, a third less people are going to jail in the first place, and it's a different environment. This is our opportunity to provide the services to people that are out of custody and will be out of custody for some time. So I think that's the conclusion of my part. happy to answer any questions now or at the end.
Thank you, Matthew.
I think you have one more slide.
Oh,
Maybe not. In my deck, you had another slide, but
sure.
what we're going to do, if it's all right, is we're going to let you all finish. Then we're going to go to public comment, and then we're going to let the group dive in to ask questions and give feedback. Thanks very much, Matt.
Sure.
Yes, thank you. And let me start actually by thanking the sheriff for all she and her team have done. I think we need only look, I don't know, what is it, 40, 45 miles north to us and look at San Quentin and see what could have been. But I think through the sheriff's terrific efforts, it's not where we are. We're in a whole different place. And I think that needs to be, sometimes we don't give gratitude for things that are omitted. And I'm glad by omission, we don't have this situation in San Quentin. And thank you, Matt, for, data is always so helpful to all of us. And I appreciate your recognition of all the partners that you're working with. You mentioned ORS, DA, PDO, ADO, IDO. It's a team effort, so thank you. This slide number 18, at the last reentry network meeting, Supervisor Chavez, you asked us to think through how we can formalize operational changes for discussion by the Board of Supervisors and how we as a county can contribute to the process for setting bail amount. Since that meeting, the public safety and justice leaders have continued to meet regularly to discuss COVID-19 and its impact on operations. Here's some good news was that our county was well positioned to adapt swiftly to the changes that were brought on by the pandemic. And that was based on our ongoing collaborative work as public safety and justice partners. Given our strong working partnerships, we have been able to think critically and respond with coordinated operational changes. We will continue to evaluate the changes that have been made and consider what efficiencies or adjustments can be made in the long term and in a sustainable manner. As I mentioned earlier, this work is also being done as we prepare for budget reductions for consideration by the board in August. Operational changes that have been made to promote safe and efficient service delivery can be categorized basically into three areas. First is diversion efforts and arrests/bookings. Second is services. And third is discharge planning and resources upon release from custody. So going to that first area, diversion, arrests, and bookings, many of the topics listed are areas the county was already working toward, but were expedited during the pandemic. Those include lowering the jail population, decreasing the use of money bail, and the use of video arraignments. As we look to ways to deploy resources efficiently and effectively, we will work on manageable, low supervision levels to ensure that clients are supported and that they have the greatest opportunity for success pre-trial. And we'll look at reducing bookings for those who will be released in consultation with behavioral health. Next slide. The operational considerations for services are the results of lessons learned during the pandemic. The Office of Reentry Services was able to quickly pivot and was able to amend many contracted services to ensure continuity of service delivery. As we continue to see fluctuations between whether our criminal justice population is predominantly pretrial, in custody, or in released status, we will maintain the flexibility to provide services where the need is highest. Next slide. Discharge and release are topics that have been discussed here at the Reentry Network, and many of the areas outlined are topics that we, as a county, were already working toward. The resource tables at Elmwood and pre-trial client survey both demonstrate the need for reliable transportation, so clients can not only be referred to services, but can follow through with ongoing classes or appointments. There was also an emphasis on needing essentials such as food, hygiene supplies, access to a phone, and a pathway to obtaining an ID. And those needs will remain after the pandemic is sort of, I guess, under control or the next phase, and those should be incorporated into our existing efforts. So that concludes our presentation. Since the operational considerations were compiled from input from various county public safety and justice leaders, Supervisor Chavez, there was an idea to have each of those leaders comment on these last few slides from their perspective. I don't know if you want to do that now and then go to public comment, or hear public comment and then go to the PSJ leaders. Either way, your preference, but we are available to answer questions.
I'm happy to have you finish the presentation if folks want to weigh in on these slides.
All right, well, let me invite each of the public safety and justice leaders to add or expand on the topics that were just covered in the last few slides from their perspective.
So shall I go first?
Sure.
Okay, thanks. So first of all, I appreciate everyone working together to do this. I was negligent in not thanking all of the partners we work with through this. There's just been a lot of cooperation, and our goal has all been the same. The one thing that I want to comment on is that there will be on the fall ballot the bail reform statewide, and that will change how releases will be done. And I think, I believe everybody thinks that it will pass. Because of that, I think that we should at least look at what the provisions are of that ballot measure and move that direction. We conceivably could get ahead of it. And so I think that if we're going to make any changes, we ought to go in the direction of what maybe the law may mandate in the future. And no other comments. Thank you.
Thanks, Lori.
Could I make a comment, Supervisor Chavez?
Of course.
I support what the sheriff is saying 100%. And in many respects, what we're doing closely resembles SB 10.
Thank you.
Hey, good morning, Deputy Chief Tyndall from San Jose PD here for Chief Garcia. I think in reference to this, and again, I know we've voiced these concerns before and continue to, and it really evolves around the booking of individuals in possession of firearms. As we know, we have seen almost double-digit reductions in most of our Part 1 crimes due to COVID, which is certainly positive. But what we certainly are seeing is a rise, especially lately, of crimes involving firearms. We continue to voice our concerns over the booking of individuals with firearms, and just the mere fact that they didn't use the firearm in commission of a crime shouldn't necessarily be the panacea to an early release or a zero bail release. And I think that's always been a concern of ours, that someone on the streets with a concealed firearm or a firearm in a vehicle, or I know we've had certain cases where firearms have been seized at times, high capacity rifles, AR-15s, AK-47s. And really when that arrest is made, the clock is ticking. It is sometimes hard for us to get through the high bail process with the DA's office and get that over to pretrial services and over obviously to the judge to hold the individual. I would certainly say, and I think everybody would agree, that the individual with firearms certainly rise to a different level of criminality on the streets and the potential violence that goes with it. And a lot of times, whether it's our patrol officers at nighttime or even on weekends, trying to get through that process in a timely manner in that time to have them held without being released is very challenging.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who hasn't weighed in that would like to weigh in before we go to public comment?
I would just briefly, sorry, phone's ringing. I'm sorry, I can't make that phone stop ringing, but I wanted to just mention Miguel asked for a comment on the last couple slides, and I think.
Hey, Wes, you got to go on mute. Okay, go ahead, Molly.
Thank you. I think Matt's presentation was excellent. Thank you for that, Matt. It was really clear and data rich. And one of the several things I pulled from it was the low rearrest rates when we've released so many people over the last 3 months. And I think we need to kind of keep our eye on that. It signals that we can, in fact, have a jail that's less populated and a community that remains safe. As far as the couple slides, I think the resource tables at Elmwood are really important, and we've partnered with Reentry to help staff those so that the gap that was reported by the pretrial service clients that Matt surveyed in terms of knowing how to get at services is met through those resource tables as one way to do it. And also the bullet point regarding Uber and Lyft rides is really important to meet the need. And I know Supervisor Chavez, you've been working on kind of getting at the problem of what happens when people are released and it's nighttime and they're alone and they don't have any transportation. So I think that seems like low-hanging fruit for us to solve a pretty critical problem. And then just finally, as far as Matt's comments about the people who are released and then rearrested within 30 days, I really think it's important to drill down on those folks, and Judge Manley probably has a very good grasp on who that client base is, because many of them are his. They have severe mental health problems and can't really function and don't have a home, and so they get a lot of contact with the police and are arrested and rearrested. So I hope we can spend some time on that population down the road. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. What I'd like to do, if it's okay, I'm going to go to the public comment, and that way we can finish discussing. And we have one public comment, I think, and then I'll come back to all of you. And I saw Matt leaning in, so I'll start with you. Scott, did you want to speak?
Our next speaker is Scott Largent. I'm unmuting you. Please accept the unmute. You will have 2 minutes to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking.
Thank you, everyone. Of course, I would like to speak. This is my therapy, because I was not happy with services through our county. I was that 8% that didn't get basically what he technically paid for in his taxes most of his life. I do enjoy, Matt, that was a great report right there. You know, you didn't sugarcoat it. These numbers that you're throwing out there, they're real, they're raw. I just don't want to see this report getting buried, tossed to the side. We all talk a big game in there right now, but when everybody turns that Zoom thing off, it just goes to the side. Everybody knows what's going on out on our streets right now. We know it's a humanitarian crisis. We know people now do not want to interact with the homeless and mentally ill because they're scared to death of getting COVID. Law enforcement that I talk to, you guys know I talk to everyone, okay? Half of them that I'm talking to from the not from the sheriff's department, from the PD, don't want to get near these people. And they've been told to stand down. They've been told to stay away from certain areas. And of course, they've been told not to arrest people. We need to do something about helping the people on the streets. And if we need to have them police themselves and start putting together sanctioned encampments like Robert Aguirre was talking about, maybe that's a good idea right now, because you guys are going to leave these people. It's already happening right now. They are the low-hanging fruit. They're the third-class passengers on the Titanic. We all know that. So why don't we figure out a different plan? Why don't we find people that are willing to take that risk, that are wanting to help people right now? Robert Aguirre goes out there with me, myself. We have other pastors from churches, faith leaders. I mean, these people are dynamite. They're superheroes in my eyes, but they are the ones that are out there and everybody else is running. I don't understand. It's like the AIDS pandemic in the 80s. You guys can't leave these people.
Thank you, Scott. I'm going to go to Matt and then to Councilmember Esparza and then to Laura. And if you can use the blue hands, great. If you can't, just wildly gesticulate. All right, Matt, and then Maya, and then Laura.
Thank you. I won't take a lot of time. To Chief Tyndall's comment, I'd be remiss in my duty if I didn't agree with him wholeheartedly. $0 bail sounds simple, but it's a lot more complex to execute. The Sheriff's Department has done a wonderful job. It's still difficult. Not all the firearms charges are covered in zero bail. Pretrial is not able to screen everybody. It's imperative that the officers from all the agencies incorporate into their probable cause affidavit a concern for public safety or likelihood of recurrence. We have a statute for that. And when we get that, then it's no longer a zero bail charge. It comes to pretrial services. We can do a thorough, holistic review and get that to a judge. That's one of the things that we are working with. It's a lot of late night calls with the Sheriff's Department and others. It's really important. SB 10, the part that I think I most like about it is the thing that I'm sure that Molly and all of us agree with, individual justice and individual cases. This is what the PAR team is doing. Look at each person and their situation and making an informed decision, because bail schedules can't be expected to cover all the different circumstances. So I hope we can move in that direction.
Maya, Councilmember Esparza.
Thank you. Matt, that was a really great presentation, really great information. I had a question about what of the 8% that are being rearrested, do we know what they're being rearrested for? Is it behavioral health related? Can you provide any insight to that?
Yes, at a future meeting, I could provide really specific breakdown. We've gathered a lot of data that we'd like to be able to share. Right now, we're going through the proper channels to make sure that we share it appropriately. But I can tell you that a lot of it has to do with substance dependence and low risk offenses. There are some concerns about danger and violence, obviously. And that's, let me just qualify, that's within a month. Within 30 days, there's about 8% of individuals that are coming back, either receiving a citation of some sort or being rearrested. And that's what's happened historically in Santa Clara County. So a problem now, a problem that we've had. And, you might say, so to be a little more direct, depending on how you categorize the offenses, for example, if you categorize auto burglary as a public safety offense, and a number of other things, obviously the ones involving weapons and violence and DUIs, then about half of those are probably public safety related. What I need to do is to defer to the public safety and justice partners, like the prosecution and defense, for them to really look at those offenses and agree upon a definition to give you a more clear answer. Petty larceny is different than stealing a car. So we really need to kind of drill down a little bit more.
Sorry, Matt. I don't know what happened there, Matt. Maya, did that answer your question?
Yeah, that answers one of them. Because just based on what I'm seeing and hearing, I understand the answer is really complicated, but I found sort of the initial response to say, yeah, substance dependence is a part of that. That aligns with what we're seeing. And I had another question, because I love that pie chart on page 14. I thought that was really, really helpful. And one of the things we've seen at the city is the populations, particularly in Guadalupe and Coyote Creek, really grow since COVID. They've gotten very large. And so I had a question around what kind of housing assistance is being offered and what does that process look like?
Can any of the team respond to that? I think Maya, who we're missing here, is our housing liaison. And Javier's not here either today. But what I'll do is there are going to be some outstanding questions that we'll follow back up on. And I think that's a really good one. One thing that I'll add is that the housing, the task force that's looking at optional shelters beyond the Measure A work is actually not going to be kicking off until September. But what I'd like to make sure of is that the task force is staffed with somebody from this committee, from our public safety justice partners, because I think that's still a missing need. And to be honest with you, Maya, we don't have enough resources. This is one of those areas where I feel like every time we talk about it, what we have to be honest about is here's what we have, and here's what the delta is. And I don't think we've gotten there yet.
President Chavez, this is Martha. Just for a moment, we are trying to get Javier on the line.
Thank you.
He's available. He's available as an attendee. He just needs to be given permission.
Oh, sorry, Jav. If you know the answer to this, I don't see you on there, Javier.
Oh, good morning, Supervisor Chucks.
Oh, great.
Yeah. Oh, just to add a few things, in terms of the diversion efforts, I think it's important for us to remember the work we're doing with the Sobering Center. So the Sobering Center is an alternative to jail for law enforcement agencies to use for those that are publicly intoxicated, and most importantly, for those that have identified a mental health or a substance use issue. And so that's something that I really want to bring to the attention to this committee and to the law enforcement agencies. That's underutilized, or it's quite utilized by our hospitals and emergency departments, and we're doing our best to encourage police officers to use it. Again, it's a 24/7 operation. It's here at the Reentry Center in terms of providing the alternative to incarceration. And then to the points that Man made in terms of services, even though we're in shelter in place, the reentry centers are open both in Gilroy and in San Jose. So a referral from a probation officer or pretrial officer probation, even law enforcement agencies, to come to the reentry center to get assessed and screened for behavioral health is a critical path. And we have clinicians here that can do that in person, one-on-one. So again, stressing that importance.
So, but to Maya, I think to your bigger question is I'm going to go back to the substance abuse and just to say to Matt and the whole staff, my expectation isn't necessarily that you're all going to agree on the risk factors relative to public safety. And the reason I'm saying that is I think it's okay for you to either come to this committee or to public safety and justice where we have disagreement, where we got to work it as much as possible to have agreement, but where we don't, I think we have to figure out a way to not leave that solely with you, but also to have a public discussion about those issues. And as an example, I would just say that, in the past, when I've talked to the DA's office, there's been a high level of concern about DUIs because of the risk to public safety. And that's an area where it's a treatment and safety problem, because you're driving a car and you're drunk, the chances of you hurting yourself or someone else are relatively high, right? So and where those areas are of conflict, I just want to say, I think it would be important to be able to bring forward what you have, even if it's not total agreement, so that as we move forward with strategies, we're able to be able to look and evaluate what decision path makes sense in the long run. And then on the point that I just want to reemphasize the housing issue, because the reason we have been so focused on Measure A was absolutely to address the needs of some part of this population too. The reason I think Supervisor Cortese is pushing us to have the shelter discussion is because he understands, like all of us do, that we're not going to get all of that housing built fast enough, and we still need to be able to provide shelter for folks. So I just say that because I think we have to just be very open about what we don't have, so that we're not surprised by the outcomes that we're having, because as we implement other parts of the system, we need to see whether or not they really do impact other parts. And I'm not sure in every case they do. And, so in any case, I'm going to go, I see you, David. I'm going to go to Maya. Maya, did you have anything else?
I have one really quick, which is in the past, I think in the joint Board of Supervisors City Council meetings, we've talked about how we can integrate our work, particularly with homeless outreach and mental and behavioral health. The city has creating a homeless outreach pilot for COVID that incorporates mental health workers. And I just kind of wanted to suggest that we can have a future discussion at the Reentry Network about what that is and how we can work more closely together.
Great, thanks, Maya. And Maya, who's the lead agency in the city working on that or leading that pilot?
It would be the city manager's office. I would suggest Jim Orpal in the city manager's office.
Great, thank you. All right, so I'm going to go to Miguel, Laura, then Mary, and then David Angel.
Thank you, Supervisor. As I mentioned in my remarks, we're at a crossroads. It's really given us an opportunity to reimagine service delivery, but I also said an important piece, which is the budget reductions that we're going through. That just means we're going to have to be more creative. It almost is a necessity that we reimagine how we deliver services. But I wanted to speak up now just to say it's not just us. As I understand it, and I'm going to ask Judge Ryan if she's okay commenting, the courts have some significant budget reductions, and the courts are so central as a partner to everything we're doing. I wonder, Judge Ryan, if you're willing to share with us what the court is facing with respect to budget reductions and how, if anything, we're going to see any difference in operations and how we can continue to partner in light of the budget challenges that you all have.
Sure, let me unmute myself. We are facing a $17 million budget deficit. So we went from the beginning of the year thinking that life was rosy. We had a budget that had increased funding, and now we've come to a position where we have a $17 million deficit. And it is devastating to the court. It's devastating to the people that are that we've had to lay off, and I can't tell you how hard that is for everyone that's involved in that process. We are instituting furloughs, voluntary separation agreements with our employees, and it is going to reduce the number of people that we have working in our court. So as a court, we are trying to meet, we are meeting regularly, and we'll have a meeting this Friday of our calendar committee to see how we can do things more efficiently, but not forget what our primary goal is, which is providing public access and public service and access to justice. So we are committed to that, just as we are committed to, in terms of bail considerations, we're committed to public safety, balanced with public health needs. And I think that is why the court did extend the zero bail until September, although we are re-examining it, and there may be some changes coming up in terms of some additional exceptions. I've heard some concerns expressed about firearms, and that's something that the court is also looking at and is concerned about. But the reason it got extended is because we are trying to balance the public safety versus the public health, and that is important. We agree that it's important to keep the jail population as low as possible, consistent with public safety.
Thank you.
Anything more specific that you want?
Thank you. Laura, Chief Garnett, and then Mary Crocker, and then David Angel.
Great. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Awesome. So 4 quick points. Again, not to be like everybody else, but great presentation, Matt. One of the big takeaways I got from that is something I feel like we know, but we don't always articulate, which is like half of those folks didn't need any services, didn't want services, or didn't need anything. I feel like we spend a lot of times when we're talking about budget reductions, we should only be offering people what they need and not assuming everybody needs everything. I think it's something that all of our departments do. So I love that data point. And I think it'll allow us to get the people who do need things exactly what they need and not overserve others. So that was a big takeaway I thought was excellent. The other is the focus on that first 30 days after release and the fact that rearrests go up. I mean, every piece of data we know says the first 30 days is everything. I mean, it's the make or break it time when somebody's released from custody. And then the 30 days after that is important, and the 30 days after that's super important, but that first 30 days is everything. So I hope, and our department right now in probation is what we're doing, is focusing a lot on that first 30 days because we're so locked down and can't do a lot of things, but we can do that. So that's what we're doing. And as a collective, I hope we'll continue to do that. Sorry. As far as what Miguel was talking about, reimagining our system. Sorry.
Laura, you're just gonna have to let him bark.
We like dogs, Laura.
Sorry. Okay. And then as far as reimagining the justice system, okay, let's let somebody else talk and come back to me.
Okay, we'll come right back to you. Mary, do you have any dogs? Do you want to go next? Go ahead, Mary.
Hi, it just occurred to me, thank you, Supervisor. It occurred to me as we were talking about that first 30 days and from working with addicts and alcoholics and people with dual diagnosis for almost 30 years. What I know is cognitively, the ability to process information is pretty impaired depending on how much time people have had to clear and the length of time they've been using, compounded with their mental health issue. And so when I was thinking about, when the group of people saying that they didn't have access to services or couldn't utilize them, that was the group I was thinking about, which is, it's discombobulating if you've been incarcerated to come out anyway. And then compounded, there's like this ability to kind of put two and two together. And so what I was picturing is a certain amount of people, even, like the tables at reentry or coming out and seeing the information, their ability to actually utilize it. So I think Javier makes a very good point about if there was a way that percentage of people could somehow be connected with the behavioral health people at reentry right away to assess their ability to participate and take advantage of the services available. Because I think that I'm guessing, and Judge Manley would know better than I, but that recidivism, you have a certain amount of people who really just can't quite use what it is we're offering. And to sort of be able to catch those people. And Javier's people, Jose's got the behavioral health. I don't know they need to be identified, but then that would be their first point. Almost like my fantasy is they'd be walked from main jail over to reentry, and say, let them be screened for their ability to participate. That's all I had to say.
Thank you very much. David?
Hi. So I just want to make, two quick comments. The first quick comment is, Supervisor Chavez, if Laura starts talking and there's no sound of a dog, I think we need a welfare check, just to make sure that everything is okay. But my second quick comment is related to the elimination of cash bail. I see my friend and colleague Damon is on the call, and I know through Molly, we've been working a lot to try to eliminate the use of cash bail altogether. It kind of got stymied, of course, with the outbreak of the epidemic that made progress on that challenging. But I think for the reasons articulated, it's also turbocharged that effort too. And I think shown us what can be done quickly. And so for those, we're all different partners in it. So from our perspective, just a reminder that, the question of exactly what conditions are needed for public safety and justice on an individual, let's say, who has a gun or a DUI, is a separate question from whether or not we need cash bail. And, it's our view that cash bail really doesn't do anything to protect public safety or to aid that person. So I'm confident we can move ahead with that. And then we may and well have some difficult, conversations or even disagreements about what conditions are appropriate for particular categories of crimes or when even detention is appropriate for particular categories of crimes. But, I do not anticipate in this county having a conflict as whether cash bail is something we need to achieve those goals. So anyway, I just wanted to make sure that one, you knew that we were really still committed to that, and two, that they're separate problems, and we can get rid of cash bail even as we figure out what are the proper things to do with people with guns or people with DUIs or domestic violence and so on. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, David. And I know you have reminded me of that a number of times. And one just point I would make is that I think there's a discussion, and we can have it here, but I also think there's a discussion that needs to happen with the chiefs, all the chiefs, so that there's a really clear understanding of why you're so confident about the distinction. And for a lot of them, they haven't been here, and they haven't been in circles where we're talking about options that are in fact public safety focused versus other issues around bail in general that people may or may not agree with and or understand. And I share that because I've had at least two chiefs talk to me about concerns, and they're linking the concerns around bail with public safety. And I think you've done a good job of helping us understand that. I just think it's worth continuing those discussions. I know you're having them, but I think we just need to continue them.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you. And I know the DA is at the Chiefs meetings, but there's been a lot of a lot on the bandwidth lately.
Yeah. And it's just something we have to stay on top of. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'm going to go back to Chief Garnett and then to Judge Manley.
I apologize so much, you guys. Okay, so my third, I only had 4. I forgot where I was. Talking about Miguel's comments about reimagining the system. So we've been working internally with our management team a lot about this because we don't know what we're reimagining because it's kind of being forced on us. But what we do know, so when things kind of open up, we don't know if we're going to have, a flood of cases coming in or we're going to stay where we are, et cetera, et cetera. So we're changing how we're looking at our data starting yesterday and or trying, our goal at the end of this, and so please don't ask for a report back on it because we're not there at all. But our goal is to actually look at who does self-correct and self-correct in a way where they don't need intensive resources that are going to be more and more scarce, and who really doesn't do well without supervision and specifically in-person supervision. And we've never really had a chance to know that, right? Because you can't just experiment on people and find out what happens if you keep things away from them. So I think, we're kind of excited about looking at this differently and seeing what we see. And I think that way, when we reimagine the justice system and what our role is in it, it'll be from a data-driven perspective. And then finally, I do, again, share everyone's concerns about the gun issue. And I just wanted to remind folks, we do, as the sheriff brought to our attention early on, which we appreciated greatly, on the issue of probation holds and the bail issue. So we do have a 24/7 on-call probation officer to screen any probationer who is arrested, and they will place a hold if it's if they have a gun, obviously. But I just wanted to say we do share that concern as well. Thank you.
Thanks very much. I think Judge Manley, you're next, and then I will go back to the board, and I've got I think I have Ms. Trinidad on as well. Go ahead, Judge.
Thank you. I just wanted to comment on, thanks to the leadership of Judge Ryan, we have been able to, the court has determined that mentally ill offenders and their cases are a priority and a necessity. And I've been hearing them since the beginning of the pandemic. What I wanted to bring out is the great concern that I've had with zero bail, and it does go to what Matt's presentation about these revolving individuals that come in and out of jail. If we cannot stabilize people with their mental health, and if we don't have a treatment plan, and if we don't have housing, we are going to see them again and again. I mean, this is what I've observed doing this daily for a number of months now. And so I think it's really important that at some point we have a discussion regarding this population. I mean, when you see jails having close to 40 or higher percent of individuals with mental health issues that are directly related to substance abuse issues, I mean, we have to not simply release people. We've got to have solid plans. And one of the things I wanted to point out to everyone, and I don't know if behavioral health is at the table, but they have done an incredible job in managing offenders out in the community. And I think it's a time for innovation. One of the things that we are doing in the mental health treatment court, in our treatment court, is holding remote hearings shortly after the individuals are released to high levels of care, such as crisis residential, where they often walk away, and allowing behavioral health to tell us who needs encouragement, who needs a discussion with the judge about change in behavior. And I think this is a time that we really have an opportunity to change the way we traditionally do business of having clients, because I don't think we're going to see mentally ill clients coming into the courtroom anytime soon. And yet they are so fragile and so vulnerable. To me, the worst thing we can do is to take a mentally ill client and I talk to them every day in custody about the virus, about how they must wear a mask in public and so forth. Many of them don't even understand what I'm talking about. And that's because of their mental illness. And so they need to be prioritized, in my view, so that we stabilize them and get them into treatment and housing. And as to housing, I just want to suggest to you, number one, why can't we give a priority to indigent mentally ill offenders? They have the highest risk of being rearrested, of being used, taken advantage of. I see it because they come back into custody and I talk to them about their experience, and that's what it is. The other thing that since the issue of shelter has come up, I strongly urge that we look at the San Antonio model again, because that actually works. And I think that you can't just put people, because I see them every day, that they're in the shelter, and I mean, they're in the encampment, then they're in the shelter, and then they're out in the street again, because there is no format or supervision or anything to give them help. And I know we have been able to do that with some of the housing that Kia has put in place, where we have the services right there. And the nice thing about the remote hearings is you can talk to the defendants when they are in their apartment, in their supportive housing, for the few that are. And to me, I just think that we need to move in a direction of giving special attention to this group of individuals. Thanks. And I'm going to apologize. I have to get on the bench, but thank you very much. And I hope we can discuss this more in the future.
Thank you. I'm so sorry that I can't say your first name properly. Will you say it for me?
Kwa, K-W-A, Kwa, C, like I see you, and watt, like the watt of a light bulb. Kwasi Watt.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, we also agree about the housing for everybody comes in. As you know, I work for Connection, and we have the day workers program here. So we have people who are homeless and anyone who needs to come for day jobs, to get paid on a temporary basis. They come here, and a lot of them are homeless, and so we work with the different housing programs in order to get them on the list, the HMIS list, like everybody else is doing, and that, to see if we could get them, housing. And it has been successful for a few of our clients. But I just wanted to remind everybody that we are here as a resource, because going back to Matt's presentation that he gave, We are a resource here for people to come when they get out of jail. If they need to get a job, you know, we have the temporary work here for anybody. Even if they go to court, Judge Manley wants to send them to us. You know, the reentry center used to send everybody out. They still do send people here. We also feed. We provide 2 meals a day, the breakfast and lunch, and the homeless can come here if they need to eat. We also get, sometimes we get an abundance of extra food, sandwiches, little trays that we can share with the mental health place that Scotty had mentioned. And, you know, we don't mind helping out and taking it down there. So I just wanted to, you know, let you guys know that we're here to help. So we're available, and we want to go drop off some flyers for different people. So if anybody wants it, I see Pablo. We'll take flyers over there and we'll do what we can. But Connection is open for the Day Worker Center. You can send your people here if they need to work or eat. We have those meals. Also, we have showers available. And we have, I'm sorry, we also have showers available for them until 10 a.m. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sherry, Aaron, and then Pablo.
Hi, good morning. This is Sherry Terrell with Behavioral Health, and I just wanted to thank everyone for their comments. Quite a few of you have mentioned both concerns related to substance use and ongoing mental health concerns. And, you know, we are working very closely in our treatment courts to ensure that there are opportunities for quick and continued linkage to needed services, as well as partnering very closely with our supportive housing services team to be able to make those connections. I also wanted to acknowledge Javier's comment around the reentry center and opportunities to continue to think about how to more effectively and efficiently ensure that individuals who can present to the reentry center can, in fact, access those screening and assessment procedures. I do think also to Miguel Marquez's point that given our significant budget concerns going forward, this does create a very significant opportunity for us to continue to think about ways that we can more efficiently or effectively make those services available. And so I just look forward to those ongoing conversations where we can really think together and strategize about how best to ensure that those individuals who really need immediate and prompt access to those services can in fact have opportunities to access those. So thank you.
Thank you, Sherry. Erin?
So I think, you know, as we all know, we're kind of living in a time of crisis, and a time that is calling on us to think about things really differently and reimagine them. And when I'm hearing all that we're talking about in terms of the issues with serving the seriously mentally ill, I'm just so aware that we continue to criminalize mental illness, and we're trying to figure out how to serve them better within the system that exists. And that's not where they should be. And I certainly don't have the answer in terms of what should be different, but what we're doing isn't the right thing to do, and it's not working. So I think that we're called on to really rethink when folks have serious mental illness, jail is not, the criminal justice system is not the right place for them. So I think we're called to think differently and act differently.
Thank you, Erin. Pablo?
So I just have 2 points really quickly. So piggybacking on what Aaron and Judge Manley said, it's critical. I know that, you know, from personal experience being caught in drug abuse and mental health issues, when I've been arrested in the past, the only thing that got me well again was having enough time to kind of balance myself out and to see things clearly. That first week or two when I was incarcerated, I was grateful at the end of the thing, not at the beginning, but to not have been let out right away, because the only thing I was thinking about was getting back to my drug use or back to my addiction, which you know, compounded my criminal behavior. So I think that with this whole situation that's going on, we have a unique opportunity to pivot how we do things and how we allocate resources for that 18% that's continually coming back into custody. It's a mental health issue, but it's seriously compounded by drug abuse, you know, and how to get back right to what you're doing. If there's if there's any way that we could figure, I know he was talking about, when Judge Manley was talking about some of those camps that have access to resources and whatnot as an option, because we can never make people stay into custody, but when you provide those options, then you start to cast out a wider net, and we'll see some success there. The other thing is that, so when these other folks are coming home and they're job ready, I think we need to figure out a way to push to help these folks get their documents to get into the services that they're going to need. There's eligibility requirements. I've said it again and again. Driver's licenses, social security cards are needed for employment. Employment is a big key to stabilizing and making a person feel like they're getting their feet in the ground. And oftentimes people come home with that desire to do something different. And then when they get hit with, I can't work for, I don't know, it's 2 weeks, 3 weeks until you get your ID or your social security card. By that time, some of that pre-contemplation that got you thinking that you wanted to do something differently gets impacted by your inability to do so. And you go back to the path of least resistance, which is what you were doing. So just really taking a way to figure out how we could connect those folks with resources. To, like, right now we have this voucher for folks that if they're born in this county, we could help them get, and they're homeless, we could help them get a birth certificate, which helps us to process them as when we're employing them. But figuring out, ways that we could, maybe speed up the process using our leverage as a county to talk to folks in the DMV and other places to just kind of speed up the process for folks that are coming home for jail and prison, because those are the folks that need it most.
Mm-hmm. Pablo, thank you very much. And what I want to do is, Matt, did you want to jump in? Go ahead.
I would, just very quickly. Scott in the public comment said it very well. The earlier the better we can get the person the appropriate service, we're all better off throughout the rest of the continuum. And to answer Maya's question, I can't give you a specific answer, but there are a lot of people that are booked on low-level, low-risk crimes, and they get released in 1 or 2 days. Maybe they don't need to be booked. Maybe they could receive a different service up front. So we're looking at things like that and other very frequently occurring charges like suspended driver's license charges that are very costly and labor intensive to process for all of us. So I would just suggest David Angel and Molly O'Neill have actually hands-on supported the PAR team. We have a team in place. It needs more resources, but it's cross-disciplinary in that there's a social worker and an investigator. And Max Sarzana is coordinating throughout his office, and Lori Stewart, Carly Ware, and Carson White. They look at the individual holistically. They also look at the system and look at ways that we can expedite processes. But if we were to incorporate a model such as the CAPS model, where we're able to share information very quickly together, because my staff's done well, it's just not sustainable. We're not trained. We don't have the resources, and we're not as well connected as we need to be to behavioral health and to Ms. Trinidad and the people that are offering this service. So if we could have a cross-disciplinary team that's basically a release team, that I think would be very helpful to Chief Garnett's point, that first 30 days that's so crucial.
So, Pablo.
I just want to add to something that Matthew was saying, and something that I forgot to mention, is that I think it's also important when we're looking at creating these programs. We've been working with the same, chiefs and product and different departments for a while. I think if we have an infusion of folks with lived experience that have a pathway to kind of, the best thing that you could do at the beginning of meeting somebody is have somebody that you could look at and that they could relate to and say, hey, this person has a story to tell and is being successful and is navigated, but also truly, genuinely understands exactly what I'm going through. And when you have that ability to spark that hope in folks, that's when you start to see success. So really taking a look at some of the ways to push, opportunities for folks with lived experience that have gone through, that understand the social and economic and racial divides, and how the system is kind of in some ways fair, in some ways not, and really be able to meet people where they're at as an advocate and as a liaison between both, the current system that's in place and where we're trying to go.
So, so first of all, I just want to say how much I appreciate everybody's feedback and comments. And I think there's a lot of really thoughtful follow-up that we can do to get us where we need to be. And I do want to just acknowledge Aaron's point. I think that we really do have to improve each system that we're engaging in as best and as fast as we can. And I think the point that's been raised about people with behavioral health problems, and you know, and I think when I actually think there are some very real options that we can take that that I think we're going to need to have more discussion about. And so to move forward, here's what I would like to recommend. I think that there was a body of work that's still in process, and there or two of them. And one is the really diving down and better understanding what our numbers tell us. But the other is having a shared approach to what path that people go on when they get into our system. And I'm, for example, one of the things that I'm mindful of is that we are, we really are part of our community. And I think that being able to address the issue around firearms, having the discussion about DUIs and other areas where we're on the bubble. Again, I just want to encourage the staff to take this time right now to have those conversations and bring back to us where we're at, even if we're not in the same place. And so that's number one. Number two, if there are areas that we need to make improvements to the system, I'm interested in understanding that. And it isn't, I'm not sure I'm going to use the right term, but I don't know if Chief Tyndall is on, but the high bail process, my understanding is that we ask for an affidavit from staff that says that they believe they're engaging with somebody who's at a high risk of being a public safety challenge, and that we require some documentation of that before this goes to the court or to pretrial services as part of the arrest. And what I'm not understanding from the public safety staff is the process more arduous than that? And if people are filling out the affidavit, are we missing it and releasing people before we should? Is that a problem? Does anybody know the answer to that question that I just raised?
Deputy Chief Tyndall here. I mean, I can speak to it from our side on here. Yes, sometimes it can be somewhat arduous. And like I said, a lot of times it ends up being the late night arrest or the weekend arrest. Normally when we do the high bail, the DA's office is involved. A lot of it is actually pulling up either past history, past arrest, criminal history, and adding it to that. And what we found on occasion, and again, I think when zero bail first came out, it was a lot more problematic. We've been dealing with and working with pretrial services quite a bit on identifying processes where we can shore those things up to get a more streamlined process to do it. But I think still on occasion, we are having circumstances where, the normal beat officer is, out on patrol and arrest somebody for possession of a firearm. And as we're working through that process, especially, and, I think we all know that we have young officers out there, they make the arrest. We could probably do a better job on the affidavits, but there's still that process of getting a hold of the DA's office and working through the affidavit process, which is different than the felony affidavit on its face, and working through that. And we've found on occasions that the arrestees are being released prior to that work being done.
Deputy Chief, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to give you a bump in title a minute ago, but are you saying that the officers aren't trained to fill out that form, and you're not able to get the DA's office on the phone fast enough to remedy that, or you can't get them on the phone fast enough to assist with it? I'm not sure I understand where the problem is.
There are occasions when during that process, because again, we may book somebody, we are not just holding them, pre-processing. A lot of times these individuals are being booked while that high bail affidavit is being worked on. And it is not just, a simple, triplicate form that you kind of fill out and drop off. It does involve multiple people, has to be processed through and has to be put in. So there actually is a time lag. I wouldn't say that we can't get a hold because there's always on-call DAs when it comes to it. But even during that time, when a lot of the information is being put forward, there is a delay and people are being released.
Lori? And then Matt.
So, Chief, what the officer is able to do is to note on the affidavit the 1269C that will provide the opportunity for then the judge to review it, give consistent with the circumstances that are on the affidavit. So that we will hold until the judge has looked at it. I know what you're talking about the one where they were released on zero bail prior to us actually processing the paperwork from your office. But had the officer written 1269C on the affidavit, it would have been reviewed by a magistrate through the pretrial process. That's something that we have signs posted in the jail that outlines that. I've sent things out to the Chiefs Association also talking about that. I'd be happy to do it again because I think that gives us 8 hours. The person can be held for up till 8 to 8 hours for the magistrate review, and they always get them done within 8 hours. So we've never had to release someone early on that.
And I do agree with you, Sheriff. And I think that, again, and the ones I think we're talking about with even the 8 hour span, we don't have bureau personnel in at night times, and we don't have, especially on weekends. So a lot of times it is having, either specialty staff getting called in to deal with that aspect of it. And again, I'm absolutely not saying that we cannot do better on our side, but I certainly think that there are some circumstances where people are being released on whatever level it is, just while the wheels are in motion. And again, especially on weekends and on evenings, while the wheels are in motion, that it'd be nice to have the ability to put the pause button on.
And I agree with you completely, Chief. Absolutely. That's something I've been talking about for quite a while on this. So, but we are adhering to the zero bail schedule and actually giving priority to the zero bail releases.
Matt, did you want to weigh in too? Go ahead.
I just want to say quickly, every single thing the sheriff said was 100% accurate. We've all been striving to adhere to the court orders. There have been dynamic changes. It's difficult to have all the different law enforcement agencies. It's a lot of moving parts, and it's a challenge to get everybody educated as things change. At this point, all that an officer would need to do is reference 1269C and substantiate a concern for public safety and or recurrence. And that would enable us to do a review and expedite it to a judge. The judges are available around the clock. If the duty judge is not, if the duty judge is asleep, there's another judge we can call. We've got it down to where we know if it's between 10 p.m. and 1 a.m., we need to call that on-call judge. And it's not taking 8 hours. It's happening a lot sooner than that. So.
I guess where this leaves me is that I think that if we have a partner agency that has a concern, we ought to just take a look at it. And Deputy Chief Tyndall, what I would say is if this is I guess what I'm not understanding is when the form gets filled out, does it require leadership sign off from internally to the San Jose Police Department? Is that where it's difficult to get people in time? Or I just didn't understand the point you were raising. I'm sorry.
Only that a lot of times in order to get the high bail portion of it. So for example, if someone is caught with a firearm and they do not use that firearm in the commission of a crime, that automatically raises to the level of a zero bail and a release because they did not actually use the firearm in commission of a crime. Now, a lot of times the things that we can apply for a high bail involve either other cases. So those may be cases that the individual is involved in either our agency or another agency. We have to get particulars on that in order to satisfy the high bail requirement. It may be a criminal history, either locally, statewide, or sometimes even something that reaches on a different state. But we have to get information from them in order to satisfy the high bail. So these are kind of unique, I would say unique, but not unusual circumstances where the clock starts ticking as soon as they're booked. Certainly we can put in the affidavit the information that we know at the time, but the 8-hour clock sometimes is a hard process to get everybody on the same page, the documentation together before it goes to the judge. And we certainly have seen circumstances where it goes to the on-call or on-duty judge, and the just information is not there yet because we haven't been able to secure it all, and we have the individual out in the street while we're still working the process.
So what I would recommend is that I just hope that I'm going to ask that our staff, Dave, sit down with you all and really look at that process. What I don't know is the 8 hours statutory as part of the zero bail program. It is, it's statutory. So here's my second thought, or my second question, is that when I had learned about this, and it's been a while since I read about it, I thought that the judges could receive information from the arrest itself that allowed them to make the case on the affidavit, irrespective of other, out of state or other research that needed to be done on that particular person. And is that not accurate? Is it more complicated than because I even thought that that we were taking, in some respects, the officer's word when someone had a firearm or there was a risk of public safety without much research on it. Is that not accurate?
Potentially somebody else could weigh in, but and just in our experience, just the mere possession of the firearm, if it is not actually used in a violent crime, would not be something that would hold somebody on a zero bail. They would be released.
Okay, well, what I'm going to ask is if you all, when you come back to finish up the slide on the 8% and also on the risk categories, if this could be addressed too in terms of process, I think would just be beneficial for us to all have a shared understanding of the process and a shared understanding of it throughout the system. Judge Ryan?
So a judge will review the circumstances of the arrest if it gets to them. I think the situation that the deputy chief may be talking about is if pretrial doesn't have the opportunity to look at it and do a full review, then the judge doesn't have the opportunity to weigh in on that. But from what I'm hearing from Mr. Fisk is if the officer puts down 1269C, pretrial is going to do a full review, and that full review includes a criminal history to the extent possible known, the circumstances of the offense, and then a judge always has the discretion, just because it says zero bail, a judge always has the discretion to set a different bail or to set a supervised OR release with conditions that might be appropriate to ensure public safety. So I think the issue is, does the case get to the judge? Because if it gets to the judge, then the judge is going to exercise their discretion on the facts of the case and the total circumstances.
So I'm going to ask that, I think that this is probably work that needs to be done and reviewed by a number of you who are on the call. And Miguel, I'm going to ask if you could just pull that team together and let's just nail this down, because there have been a number of areas, and I think this may be one of them, when zero bail very first went into effect, where we had conflict in terms of the shared understanding between all the public safety and justice partners over how and under what terms and conditions some public safety was more rigorously reviewed. And so anyway, so I just want to make sure that gets done, and it should just come back here as part of the next phase of work that people are working on. Just because I think because we don't want to talk about a specific case. This has to be a systemic discussion. It's got to be a little deeper. The only other things, I actually had quite a few comments. I wanted to thank the staff for the report. I really wanted to hone in on the thing that Laura told me not to, and that is on the issue of who self-corrects and who needs more supervision. And the only thing I wanted to add is, as the staff is taking a look at this, I actually think there's a third bucket. There's the folks who don't need resources and assets, or resources from the public, but are going to move forward and we're not going to see them again. And to your point, Laura, I think it would be great to understand who that is. I think there are some people who are going to require a high level of supervision, and then some that require something slightly different. When we use the term supervision, what I worry about is that we give people a whole bunch of golden eagle feathers to go collect, and then they're not going to be successful because they actually need support and supervision. There are some that just need supervision, right? And I can think about who those categories might be, but I think there's actually 3 buckets, not 2 distinct buckets. So as you take a look at this, I'd be really interested in understanding who falls in that category. And then the only other thing I just wanted to raise is that I think one issue that we really, I just want to say, I think Pablo Gaxiola's point is a really, really important one, which is, as the next phases of discussion and consideration come forward, I think being able to pull together people with lived experience to hear their perspective on what we're doing is really, really important. And I think in some ways we substitute our thinking for the experience of others. And I think we have to, as we become more client-centered, we really have to think about that. And I just want to give you an example that doesn't have anything to do with what we're talking about. But for those of you who've been on the human trafficking task force, one of the things that I remember very much is us having a very big debate about human trafficking victims and what supports they needed to get away from the life they were in and the person who was dominating them. And we had this big debate, and it's still in my mind one that's not cleared up, which is we had some people who were formerly part of that experience who said that being in custody, they didn't like it, but being in custody created some separation from them and the person that allowed them to have a conversation with a counselor. Now, other people didn't need that. They got counseling, and other people didn't want the help. And we say, here's the way that we ought to approach this. And if we're really being client-centered and we really want to help people, we have to really think about all the parties that are a part of this, and that includes the families of people who are in custody. And I'll just share one other story. When we did a tour with parents who are activists in NAMI of Elmwood, they were they wanted to talk about programming in custody because for many of them, their adult children weren't safe in the world, and they had no way of making them safe. The families weren't safe, the person wasn't safe, and we just have to be able to intellectually, honestly have that conversation. In their minds, the fact that they were in Elmwood was helpful to them. And to advocates that I've taken on that same tour, not helpful. So I do think we have to really dig deeper into this. And I think this is an opportunity for us to do that. And I'm not saying I have the answers, and I'm not even saying the answers are black and white. It's just something we need to take a deeper dive into. And then the last thing I wanted to request, Javier, is that I think as we're having the discussion with our justice partners around the affidavit issue, and that we should also do a reintroduction to the sobering station. And we initially did that and designed it in partnership, I know, with primarily with the city of San Jose. I think it's worth reintroducing that to people, to line officers. And I also think it's really important that we don't assume that by doing a presentation every couple of years, like we've got to be at a lot of briefings and just reminding people they get a lot of information and a lot of data, and being able to get information on an ongoing basis I think, the way we can be most helpful. So I'd be interested in how we're doing that outreach. Thank you. Well, thank you all. This was, I thought, very important and a very helpful discussion. And I want to thank all of you very much for taking the time to dive into this. I'll look forward to getting, Miguel, from you, like what you think some of the big next steps are. And I just want you to know that our staff sent me a legal brief explaining why we needed to do votes by all of you. I'm on like 1,000 boards right now, and they all do it a little different. So, which is what prompted me to try to save 2 minutes. And now I'm going to spend another, I don't know, maybe an hour discussing this. So in any case, I want you all to have a good day, be safe, wash your hands, wear your masks. And I look forward to seeing you again very soon. Be well, everyone. Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Bye.